Minji Park sat in the back row of her advanced English literature class, her hands shaking as she held her essay. The paper was covered with notes and corrections that she had made the night before. She had stayed up until 2 in the morning, reading each sentence out loud to make sure everything sounded perfect. Today was presentation day. Minji had to stand in front of the class and talk about her essay. The topic was linguistic patterns in Shakespeare's plays. She loved this topic. She had spent weeks researching, finding patterns that even some college students might miss. Mrs. Catherine Whitmore sat at her desk at the front of the room. She was a tall woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had been teaching at Jefferson High School for over 20 years. Everyone knew her. Some students liked her. Many students feared her. Mrs. Whitmore looked at her list. Minji Park, she called out. Her voice was flat and cold. Minji stood up. Her legs felt weak. She walked to the front of the classroom, passing rows of students from wealthy families. They wore expensive clothes and carried the latest phones. Minji wore a simple blue sweater that her mother had bought from a discount store 3 years ago. She reached the front and turned to face the class. 24 faces stared back at her. Some looked bored, some looked at their phones under their desks. A few looked interested. Minji took a deep breath. She began to speak. Shakespeare used interesting patterns in his language, she said. In his early plays, he used more simple words, but in his later plays, he used more complex words. This shows how he grew as a writer. She continued talking, explaining the research she had done. She talked about how Shakespeare mixed formal and informal language. She explained how he created new words that we still use today. Then Mrs. Whitmore interrupted her. "Repeat that last sentence," Mrs. Whitmore said. Minji stopped. She felt confused. "Which sentence?" she asked. "The one about linguistic evolution," Mrs. Whitmore said. She had a strange smile on her face. Minji repeated the sentence. Shakespeare's linguistic evolution shows his understanding of how language works in society. Mrs. Whitmore stood up from her desk. She walked toward Minji slowly. "Say it again," she said. "But this time say it clearly." Minji felt her face grow hot. She repeated the sentence again. Her accent came through a little bit on some words. English was not her first language. She had moved to America when she was 8 years old. She spoke English well, but sometimes certain sounds were hard for her. Mrs. Whitmore turned to the class. Then she did something that made Minji's blood run cold. The teacher began to imitate Minji's accent. She exaggerated it, making it sound strange and funny. "Linguistic evolution," she said in a mocking voice. Some students in the class started to laugh. Minji stood frozen. She could not move. She could not speak. Mrs. Whitmore continued. "Perhaps, Miss Park, you should focus on mastering basic English pronunciation before you attempt to analyze Shakespeare." She said the words slowly, as if Minji was a small child who could not understand. More students laughed now. Not everyone. Minji saw some students look away. Her best friend Ji-won looked angry and upset. But the damage was done. The laughter echoed in Minji's ears. "Your analysis might be interesting," Mrs. Whitmore continued. "But if you cannot speak clearly, how can we understand your ideas? Maybe you should spend less time on complicated topics and more time on basic English skills." Minji wanted to disappear. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her. She looked down at her essay. She had worked so hard on it. She had brilliant ideas in those pages. She had discovered patterns that she had never seen mentioned in any book. But none of that mattered now. All that mattered was her accent. All that mattered was that she sounded different. The bell rang. Students began to pack their bags and leave. Minji stood at the front for a moment, still frozen. Then she gathered her papers with shaking hands. Some of the pages fell to the floor. She bent down to pick them up, and she felt tears starting to form in her eyes. "Next time, prepare better," Mrs. Whitmore said as she walked past Minji to leave the classroom. Minji finally made it out into the hallway. Ji-won was waiting for her. "Minji, are you okay?" Ji-won asked. She put her hand on Minji's shoulder. Minji nodded, but she could not speak. If she spoke, she would cry. "That was so wrong," Ji-won said. Her voice was angry. What Mrs. Whitmore did was completely wrong. You should report her. Minji shook her head. It will not help, she whispered. It will only make things worse. They walked down the hallway together. All around them, students from wealthy families laughed and talked. They had names like Ashley and Brandon and Tyler. They had never been mocked for how they spoke. They had never been told they were not good enough. This was not the first time Mrs. Whitmore had treated Minji badly. There had been other moments. Small comments about Minji's writing. Questions about whether Minji really understood the readings. Suggestions that maybe Minji would be more comfortable in easier classes. But this was the worst. This was public humiliation in front of everyone. As Minji walked home that afternoon, she passed through the wealthy neighborhood near the school. Big houses with perfect lawns lined both sides of the street. Expensive cars sat in driveways. These were the homes of her classmates. She kept walking until she reached the small apartment complex where she lived with her mother. The building was old, the paint was peeling, but it was home. Minji climbed the stairs to the third floor. She unlocked the door to apartment 3B. Inside, everything was quiet. Her mother was still at work. Hyejin worked as a janitor at the hospital. She worked double shifts most days to pay for rent and food and Minji's school supplies. Minji dropped her backpack on the floor. She went to her small bedroom and closed the door. Then finally, she let herself cry. She cried for the humiliation. She cried for her mother who worked so hard. She cried because no matter how smart she was, no matter how hard she worked, some people would always see her as less than others. After a while, the tears stopped. Minji wiped her eyes. She looked around her room. The walls were covered with papers and charts. Languages fascinated her. She had charts showing how different accents formed. She had maps showing how languages spread across the world. On her desk sat her old laptop. It was slow and the screen had a crack in one corner. But it worked. And on that laptop were files that contained something special, something that nobody at school knew about. Minji opened the laptop. She looked at the folders full of research papers she had written, papers about language patterns, papers about how accents develop, papers about discrimination based on how people speak. She had submitted some of these papers to academic journals, small journals that most people had never heard of. She used only her initials, M.J. Park. She was too afraid to use her full name. She was afraid of more mockery. But some of those papers had been accepted. Some had been published. Real academics had read her work. Some had even cited her research in their own papers. Mrs. Whitmore thought Minji could not even speak English properly. But Minji was writing academic papers about English that graduate students would struggle to write. The irony was painful. Minji heard the front door open. Her mother was home. Minji quickly wiped her eyes again and tried to smile. She did not want her mother to worry. Hyejin already worked too hard and worried too much. Minji? Her mother called out. Are you home? Yes, Mom, Minji answered. She came out of her bedroom. Hyejin looked tired. She always looked tired after her shifts. But she smiled when she saw Minji. How was school today? She asked in Korean. At home, they usually spoke Korean together. Minji hesitated. Should she tell her mother what happened? She decided not to. It was fine, she lied. Just a normal day. They made dinner together, rice and vegetables and a small piece of fish. Simple food, but it was good. As they ate, Hyejin talked about her day at the hospital. She talked about the doctors and nurses she worked with. She talked in English, practicing, always trying to improve. Minji listened and helped her mother with difficult words. She had been doing this since she was a child. In many ways, she had helped her mother learn English while learning it herself. After dinner, Minji went back to her room. She sat at her desk and opened her laptop again. She looked at her latest research paper. It was about accent discrimination in education. It was about how teachers sometimes treated students differently based on how they spoke. She had been working on this paper for months. Now, after today, she had new motivation. She would finish this paper. She would make it brilliant. She would prove that she was more than her accent. Mrs. Whitmore had tried to make her feel small, but Minji would not stay small. She would rise above this. She had to. She began to type, her fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. Outside her window, the sun was setting over the city. In the wealthy neighborhood, families were sitting down to expensive dinners. But here, in this small apartment, something important was happening. A girl who had been mocked and humiliated was turning her pain into power. She was using her brilliant mind to fight back in the only way she knew how. Through research, through words, through proof that she was extraordinary no matter what anyone said about how she spoke. Minji worked late into the night just like she always did. But tonight was different. Tonight she was not just studying. She was preparing for something bigger. She did not know it yet. But her life was about to change in ways she could not imagine. The next morning, Minji woke up with her head still on her desk. She had fallen asleep while working on her research paper. Her neck was stiff, and her eyes felt heavy. The laptop screen had gone dark hours ago. She looked at the clock. 6 in the morning. Her mother would be waking up soon for her morning shift at the hospital. Minji quickly changed clothes and went to the kitchen to make breakfast. This was their routine. Minji always tried to have breakfast ready when her mother woke up. It was a small thing, but it helped. Hyejin worked so hard for them. Minji wanted to help in any way she could. She made rice and eggs and hot tea. Simple but warm. When Hyejin came out of her bedroom, still looking tired from yesterday's double shift, she smiled at the food on the table. "You are such a good daughter," Hyejin said in Korean. She sat down, and they ate together in comfortable silence. Minji did not mention what happened at school yesterday. She did not want to burden her mother. Hyejin had enough to worry about. After breakfast, Hyejin left for work. Minji cleaned up the dishes and got ready for school. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. She looked the same as always. Black hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, dark eyes that her mother said were intelligent and kind, a face that showed her Korean heritage clearly, but she did not feel the same. Yesterday had changed something inside her. The humiliation still burned. But along with the pain, there was also determination. She would not let Mrs. Whitmore break her spirit. At school, Minji tried to avoid Mrs. Whitmore's class, but she had English literature 4th period every day. There was no way around it. When 4th period came, Minji walked into the classroom with her head down. She sat in her usual seat in the back row. Jiwon sat next to her and squeezed her hand under the desk. Mrs. Whitmore taught the class as if nothing had happened. She talked about poetry. She called on students to read aloud. She did not call on Minji. She did not even look at Minji. This was somehow worse than the mockery. Minji felt invisible. She felt erased. The class ended and Minji left quickly. She did not want to stay in that room 1 second longer than necessary. The rest of the day passed slowly. Math class, science class, history class. Minji went through the motions, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept thinking about her research. She kept thinking about all the work she had done that nobody at school knew about. Finally, the last bell rang. School was over. Minji walked home through the wealthy neighborhood like she did every day. She passed the big houses and the expensive cars. She passed students who would go home to their own bedrooms in big houses, with parents who had time to help with homework and money for tutors. Minji's path took her past the country club where some of her classmates' families had memberships. She passed the shopping district with stores that sold clothes she could never afford. She kept walking until the neighborhood changed. The houses got smaller, the cars got older, the streets got busier. When she reached her apartment building, she climbed the 3 floors and let herself in. The apartment was empty and quiet. Her mother would not be home for many more hours. Minji dropped her backpack and went straight to her bedroom. This room was her sanctuary. This was where she could be herself. The room was small. There was a bed, a desk, and a small closet. But every inch of wall space was covered with her work. There were charts showing phonetic patterns across different languages. There were maps showing where different accents developed. There were timelines showing how English had evolved over centuries. To anyone else, it might look like the room of someone obsessed. But to Minji, it was beautiful. It was her life's passion displayed on the walls. She sat at her desk and opened her laptop. The old machine took a long time to start up. While she waited, she looked at the papers on her desk. There were printouts of academic articles from linguistics journals. There were pages of notes in her neat handwriting. There were calculations and statistical analyses. This had been her secret for 4 years now. Since she was 12 years old, Minji had been fascinated by language. It started when she noticed patterns in how her mother's co-workers spoke. They all came from different countries. They all spoke English, but each person's English was different. They had different accents, different word choices, different rhythms to their speech. Minji had started to write down what she noticed. She made lists of common pronunciation differences. She noticed that certain sounds were harder for speakers of certain languages. She saw patterns that repeated across different people from the same regions. At first, it was just a hobby, something interesting to think about. But then she started to read academic papers online. She discovered that there was a whole field of study called sociolinguistics. There were professors and researchers who studied exactly the things that fascinated her. Minji read everything she could find. She taught herself research methods, she learned statistics. She studied phonetics and grammar and language history, all on her own, using free resources online and books from the library. When she was 14, she wrote her first real research paper. It was about accent patterns in Korean-English bilingual speakers. She had studied her mother and her mother's friends, recording how they spoke and analyzing the patterns. She did not know what to do with the paper at first. But then she found a small academic journal that accepted submissions from independent researchers. She submitted her paper using just her initials, M.J. Park. She was too afraid to use her full name. She was afraid people would see her age and reject her work without reading it. 6 weeks later, she got an email. Her paper had been accepted for publication. Minji had cried when she read that email. Someone thought her work was good enough to publish. Real academics would read her research. Since then, she had published 6 more papers in various small journals. Each time she used only M.J. Park. Nobody knew that the researcher was a teenage girl from a poor family. Nobody knew that M.J. Park did her research in a tiny apartment bedroom with a cracked laptop. Minji opened her files now and looked at her published work. 7 papers total. They had titles like Phonetic Transfer Patterns in Korean-English Bilinguals and Socioeconomic Factors in Accent Discrimination. They were full of data and analysis and insights that had taken her months to develop. She had even been cited by other researchers. Real professors at real universities had read her work and mentioned it in their own papers. They had no idea they were citing a high school student. Minji clicked on a new document. This was her current project, the paper she had been working on for months. It was titled Accent as Identity, Linguistic Discrimination in American Classrooms. This paper was different from her others. It was more personal. She was using her own experiences as part of the research. She had documented every time a teacher had treated her differently because of her accent. She had collected stories from other students like her. She had analyzed grade patterns and found that teachers often graded students with accents more harshly, even when the work quality was the same. The data was clear. The patterns were undeniable. Accent discrimination in schools was real and widespread. Yesterday's humiliation had given her even more material for this paper. Mrs. Whitmore's behavior was a perfect example of everything Minji was researching. The mockery, the public humiliation, the suggestion that accent meant lack of intelligence. Minji worked on the paper for hours. She added new data. She refined her analysis. She made her arguments stronger. The sun set outside her window and the room grew dark, but she barely noticed. She was lost in her work. Around 7 o'clock, she heard the front door open. Her mother was home from her first shift. Minji saved her work and came out of her bedroom. "Hi, Mom," she said in Korean. "Are you hungry? I can make dinner." Yejin smiled tiredly. "Let me help you," she said. They cooked together in the small kitchen, rice and vegetables and kimchi that Hyejin had made last week. While they cooked, Hyejin talked about her day. She told funny stories about things that happened at the hospital. She talked about the nice nurse who always said hello to her. She talked about the doctor who had complimented how clean the floors were. Minji listened and smiled. Her mother found joy in small things. Despite working hard jobs for long hours, despite struggling with money, Hee-jin remained positive. She was Minji's hero. "How was your day?" Hee-jin asked as they sat down to eat. Minji hesitated. She wanted to tell her mother everything. She wanted to tell her about Mrs. Whitmore's cruelty. She wanted to cry on her mother's shoulder. But she looked at Hee-jin's tired face and decided not to. "It was good," Minji said. "Just normal school stuff." Hee-jin looked at her carefully. Mothers know when their children are hiding something. But she did not push. "How is your English class?" she asked. "Fine," Minji lied. "We are studying poetry now." "That is good," Hee-jin said. "You are so smart with languages. You get that from your father." Minji's father had died when she was 6 years old. She barely remembered him. But Hee-jin often said he had been good with languages. He had spoken Korean, English, and Japanese. He had worked as a translator before he got sick. Maybe that was where Minji's gift came from. A genetic inheritance from a father she hardly knew. After dinner, Hee-jin needed to rest before her night shift started at 10. She went to her bedroom to sleep for a few hours. Minji cleaned up the kitchen quietly, trying not to make any noise. Then she went back to her bedroom and back to her laptop. She opened her research again, but this time she also opened her email. Minji had a secret email account that she used for her academic work. It was separate from her regular email. This account was just for MJ Park, the researcher. She checked her inbox. There were the usual academic newsletters. There was spam about conferences she could not afford to attend. And then there was something interesting. An email from an editor at a linguistics journal. A bigger journal than the ones that had published her work before. The email was asking if MJ Park would be interested in submitting work to their next issue. They were looking for papers on sociolinguistics and language discrimination. Minji's heart started beating faster. This journal was respected. Professors at major universities published in this journal. If she could get her current paper published there, it would be a big achievement. But it was also risky. A bigger journal might ask more questions. They might want to know more about MJ Park's background and credentials. They might discover that she was only 16 years old and still in high school. Minji stared at the email for a long time. Should she reply? Should she submit her paper? She thought about Mrs. Whitmore's mocking voice. She thought about the laughter in the classroom. She thought about all the times she had been made to feel less than others because of her accent. She clicked reply. "Dear editor," she typed. "Thank you for your interest in my work. I am currently completing a research paper that would be perfect for your journal. The paper examines accent discrimination in educational settings, with original data and analysis. I would be honored to submit it for your consideration." She read the email 3 times before hitting send. Then she closed the laptop and sat back in her chair. Outside her window, the city lights were coming on. Somewhere out there, in big houses and comfortable lives, her classmates were probably doing homework or watching TV or talking to their friends. They had no idea that a girl they barely noticed was doing work that real academics cared about. Minji looked around her small bedroom, at the charts on the walls, at the stacks of papers on her desk, at the old laptop that held her entire academic career. This room might be small. Her family might be poor. Her accent might be different. But her mind was extraordinary. Her research was real and valuable. And someday, somehow, people would know it. She just had to keep working, keep researching, keep pushing forward. Mrs. Whitmore might think Minji was just a poor student who could not speak English properly. But Mrs. Whitmore was wrong, so very wrong. Minji smiled to herself in the dark room. She had a secret weapon that nobody at school knew about. She had a brilliant mind and the determination to use it. Tomorrow she would go back to school. She would sit in Mrs. Whitmore's class and endure whatever came. But she would also come home and work on her research. She would build her academic career, piece by piece, paper by paper. One day, the truth would come out. One day everyone would know what Minji Park was really capable of. And on that day, all the mockery and humiliation would be proven wrong. But for now, she would keep her secret. She would keep working in silence. She would let her research speak for itself. Minji opened her laptop one more time and looked at her paper. She had about 30 pages written so far. She needed at least 40 for the journal submission. That meant more work, more late nights, more research. But she was ready. She had been preparing for this her whole life, even before she knew what she was preparing for. She began to type again, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Outside, the night grew darker. Inside, a brilliant mind was at work, creating something that would eventually change everything. 2 weeks passed after the humiliation in Mrs. Whitmore's class. Minji went to school every day, sat through English literature, and said as little as possible. Mrs. Whitmore ignored her most of the time, which was both a relief and an insult. But then something changed. Mrs. Whitmore announced a major project. "Class," she said one Monday morning, "your next assignment will be a research paper. You will choose any aspect of English language development that interests you. The paper should be at least 10 pages long. It will count for 25% of your grade." Students groaned. 10 pages seemed like a lot. But Minji felt a flutter of excitement in her chest. This was her chance. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for. She could take all her research, all her knowledge, and show Mrs. Whitmore what she was really capable of. She could prove that she was not just some student with an accent who could barely speak English. She was a serious researcher with real insights. Mrs. Whitmore continued talking. "You have 4 weeks to complete this project. I expect proper citations, clear arguments, and original thinking. This is not a summary of what you read on Wikipedia. This is real academic work." She looked around the room. Her eyes passed over Minji without stopping. "I know some of you will struggle with this assignment. If you need extra help, there are tutoring services available. Some of you might want to consider simpler topics that are more appropriate for your level." Minji knew that comment was directed at her. Mrs. Whitmore always did this. She made general comments that were really aimed at specific students. Usually students like Minji who were from poor families or who had accents or who looked different. But this time, Minji did not feel hurt. She felt motivated. She knew exactly what paper she would write. She would take her research on accent discrimination in classrooms and adapt it for this assignment. She would show Mrs. Whitmore exactly what she thought of teachers who judge students based on how they spoke. After class, Jiwon caught up with Minji in the hallway. "Are you going to write about linguistics?" Jiwon asked. She knew about Minji's passion, though she did not know about the published papers. "Yes," Minji said. "I am going to write about accent bias in education." Jiwon's eyes went wide. "That is a bold choice. Mrs. Whitmore might not like it." "I do not care what she likes," Minji said. For the first time in weeks, she felt strong. "I am going to write the best paper in that class. I am going to show her who I really am." That afternoon, Minji went straight home and got to work. She had already done most of the research for her academic paper. Now she just needed to adapt it for a high school assignment. She would make it shorter, simpler, but still powerful. She worked for hours, pulling together data and examples. She included statistics about how teachers grade students with accents more harshly. She added research about unconscious bias in classrooms. She wrote about the psychological impact of accent discrimination on students. It was personal, but it was also academic. It was emotional, but it was also based on solid research. It was exactly the kind of paper that Mrs. Whitmore said she wanted. Original thinking based on real evidence. Minji worked on the paper every day after school. She refined her arguments. She checked her citations. She made sure every claim was supported by data. By the end of the first week, she had 15 pages. By the end of the second week, she had 30 pages. The assignment only required 10 pages, but Minji could not stop. She had so much to say. She had so much evidence. She wanted this paper to be undeniable. Meanwhile, things in class got worse. Mrs. Whitmore seemed to have decided that Minji was not worth her time. She called on other students to answer questions. She praised their ideas, even when those ideas were simple or obvious. But when Minji raised her hand, Mrs. Whitmore looked right through her. One day, a student named Tyler gave an answer that was completely wrong. He said that Shakespeare invented the English language. Mrs. Whitmore smiled and said, "That is an interesting perspective, Tyler. Very creative thinking. Minji could not help herself. She raised her hand. Actually, she said, Shakespeare wrote in early modern English which already existed. He did create many new words, but he did not invent the language itself. The class went quiet. Mrs. Whitmore's smile disappeared. Miss Park, she said coldly, I did not call on you, and perhaps you should focus on understanding basic concepts before you try to correct others. Minji felt her face grow hot. She had been right. She had given a factual correction. But Mrs. Whitmore had dismissed her again. After class, Tyler walked past Minji's desk. Thanks for making me look stupid, he muttered. Minji wanted to say that he had made himself look stupid by not knowing basic facts. But she stayed quiet. There was no point in making more enemies. That week, something else happened that made things worse. The school had parent-teacher conferences. Hyejin took time off from work to come. She put on her best dress and practiced English phrases on the way to school. Minji waited outside the classroom while her mother talked to Mrs. Whitmore. Through the door, she could hear some of the conversation. Mrs. Park, Mrs. Whitmore said, in a loud, slow voice, as if Hyejin was deaf or stupid. I am concerned about Minji's performance in my class. Her performance? Hyejin asked. Minji could hear the worry in her mother's voice. Is something wrong? Her grades are good, yes? Her grades are adequate, Mrs. Whitmore said. But I worry that she is in classes that are too advanced for her. Have you considered that she might be more comfortable in ESL classes? ESL meant English as a second language. Those classes were for students who were still learning basic English. Minji had tested out of ESL classes when she was in 5th grade. She was taking advanced English literature now. She did not need ESL. But Minji speaks English very well, Hyejin said. Her voice was quiet but firm. She reads difficult books. She writes good papers. Mrs. Park, Mrs. Whitmore said, her voice dripping with false patience. I know you want the best for your daughter. But sometimes we need to be realistic about a student's abilities. Minji's accent makes it difficult for her to express complex ideas. I think she would be happier and more successful in classes that match her level. Minji felt like she had been punched in the stomach. Mrs. Whitmore was trying to get her removed from advanced classes. She was using Minji's accent as an excuse to push her into lower-level courses. My daughter is very smart, Hyejin said. Minji could hear her mother's accent getting stronger. It always did when she was nervous or upset. She works very hard. She studies every night. Her test scores are high. I understand, Mrs. Whitmore said in a tone that made it clear she did not understand at all. But academic success is about more than just test scores. It is about being able to communicate effectively. And frankly, Minji's language barriers are holding her back. The meeting ended shortly after that. Hyejin came out of the classroom looking small and defeated. Minji took her mother's hand. They walked to the bus stop in silence. On the bus ride home, Hyejin finally spoke. Is it true? She asked in Korean. Are your classes too hard? Should we ask for different classes? No, Mom, Minji said firmly. My classes are not too hard. I am doing well. Mrs. Whitmore just does not like me. But why? Hyejin asked. Her eyes were full of tears. You are such a good student. You work so hard. Minji wanted to say that it was because of racism. It was because Mrs. Whitmore looked at Minji and saw only a poor Korean girl with an accent. She did not see intelligence or hard work or potential. She saw someone who did not fit her idea of what a good student should be. But Minji could not say this to her mother. Hyejin already felt bad enough. She already blamed herself for not being able to give Minji more. She already worried that their poverty and her own accent were holding Minji back. It is okay, Mom, Minji said. I will prove her wrong. Just wait. That night, Minji could not sleep. She lay in bed and heard her mother crying in the next room. Hyejin was trying to be quiet, but the walls were thin. Minji could hear every sob. Her mother was crying because a teacher had made her feel like she was failing her daughter. Because a teacher had suggested that Hyejin's language skills were not good enough, and that was hurting Minji. because a teacher had made her feel ashamed. Minji got out of bed. She went to her desk and turned on her laptop. She opened her research paper. The paper that was now 40 pages long. The paper that was filled with evidence and analysis and truth. She worked through the night, fueled by anger and determination. She refined every argument. She strengthened every claim. She made the paper absolutely undeniable. By the time the sun came up, Minji had a paper that was 42 pages long. It was far more than the assignment required, but it was also the best work she had ever done. It combined her academic research with her personal experience. It had statistics and stories. It had evidence and emotion. The paper was titled, Accent Bias in American Classrooms: How Linguistic Discrimination Affects Student Achievement. It was powerful and it was true. Minji knew that submitting this paper was a risk. Mrs. Whitmore would not like it. She would probably be angry. But Minji did not care anymore. She was tired of being silent. She was tired of being dismissed. She was tired of watching her mother cry because a teacher made her feel inadequate. It was time to fight back. And Minji's weapon was her intelligence. The next day at school, Minji felt different. She walked through the hallways with her head up. She carried her 42-page paper in a folder. It was neatly printed and properly formatted with a table of contents and a bibliography. In English class, Mrs. Whitmore collected the papers. Most students handed in 10 or 12 pages. Some handed in less. When Minji walked up to turn in her paper, Mrs. Whitmore looked at the thick stack of pages with surprise. "This seems excessive, Miss Park," she said. "The assignment said at least 10 pages, Minji replied. "I had more to say." Mrs. Whitmore flipped through the pages, her expression growing colder. "You will need to present your findings to the class next week," she said. "I hope you can explain your work clearly." There it was again. The implication that Minji could not speak clearly. The suggestion that she could not explain her own ideas. "I will be ready," Minji said. She walked back to her seat. Jiwon looked at her with wide eyes. "How long is your paper?" she whispered. "Long enough," Minji said. That week felt like the longest week of Minji's life. She knew Mrs. Whitmore was reading her paper. She knew the teacher would be angry. The paper was essentially a criticism of everything Mrs. Whitmore had done to her. But Minji had been careful. She had not mentioned any teachers by name. She had not described specific incidents. She had kept everything general and academic. Mrs. Whitmore would know the paper was about her, but she could not prove it. On Friday, Mrs. Whitmore handed back papers to most of the class. She gave comments and grades, but she did not give Minji her paper back. "Miss Park," Mrs. Whitmore said at the end of class, "please stay after the bell." Minji's heart sank. This was not good. After the other students left, Minji stood in front of Mrs. Whitmore's desk. The teacher held Minji's paper in her hands. Her face was red and angry. "This paper," Mrs. Whitmore said slowly, "is unacceptable." "Why?" Minji asked. "What is wrong with it?" "Everything," Mrs. Whitmore said. "The topic is inappropriate. The research is questionable, and frankly, I do not believe you wrote this yourself." Minji felt like the room was spinning. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Mrs. Whitmore said, standing up, "that this level of work is beyond your capabilities. The writing is too sophisticated. The research is too advanced. You clearly had help, or you copied from somewhere." "I did not copy," Minji said. Her voice was shaking. "Every word is mine. I did all the research myself." "Then you will not mind explaining your sources to the principal," Mrs. Whitmore said. She picked up her phone. "I am reporting you for academic dishonesty." Minji could not believe this was happening. She had written the best paper in the class, and now she was being accused of cheating. Not because there was any evidence of cheating, but because Mrs. Whitmore could not believe that Minji was capable of good work. "This is not fair," Minji said. "You have no proof." "I have 42 pages of proof," Mrs. Whitmore said. "This is not the work of a high school student, especially not a student with your language limitations." There it was. The truth. Mrs. Whitmore did not think Minji could write well because of her accent, because of her background, because of who she was. "I want to call my mother," Minji said. "You will have that opportunity," Mrs. Whitmore said. "But first, we are going to see Principal Harrison." Minji followed Mrs. Whitmore down the hallway to the principal's office. Students stared as they passed. Word would spread quickly that Minji was in trouble. In the principal's office, Mrs. Whitmore laid out her accusation. She said Minji's paper was too good to be her own work. She said the research was too sophisticated. She said Minji must have plagiarized or had someone write it for her. Principal Harrison was a tired-looking man who seemed uncomfortable with the situation. He asked Minji if she had written the paper herself. "Yes," Minji said. "Every word." "Can you prove that?" he asked. "How can I prove I wrote something?" Minji asked. "I can tell you about my research. I can explain my sources. But how do I prove the thoughts in my head are mine?" Principal Harrison looked at Mrs. Whitmore. "Do you have any actual evidence of plagiarism?" he asked. "Did you find the text copied from somewhere?" "I searched for key phrases online and found nothing," Mrs. Whitmore admitted. "But that does not mean she did not have help. Perhaps someone wrote it for her. Perhaps she paid someone." Minji felt tears of anger forming in her eyes. This was so unfair. She had done excellent work, and now she was being punished for it. "I am going to have to suspend you pending investigation," Principal Harrison said. He looked apologetic but firm. "We take academic dishonesty very seriously." "But I did not cheat," Minji said. "Please, you have to believe me." "We will investigate thoroughly," he said. "But until then, you cannot attend classes. You will need to go home now. We will call your mother." Minji walked out of the school in a daze. This could not be happening. Her greatest achievement had become her biggest disaster. Her attempt to prove herself had backfired completely. She walked home slowly, barely seeing where she was going. When she got to the apartment, she sat on her bed and finally let herself cry. She cried for the unfairness of it all. She cried for her mother, who would be disappointed. She cried because no matter what she did, it was never enough. Hee-jin came home from work early that day. The school had called her at the hospital. She rushed home, worried and confused. When she opened the door to the apartment, she found Minji sitting on the couch, her eyes red from crying. "What happened?" Hee-jin asked in Korean. She sat next to her daughter and put her arm around her shoulders. Minji told her everything. The research paper, the accusation, the suspension. She told her mother about all the work she had done, all the research, all the evidence she had gathered. She explained how she had tried to prove herself, and how it had all gone wrong. Hye-jin listened quietly. When Minji finished, her mother was silent for a long time. "You wrote this paper yourself?" Hye-jin finally asked. "Yes, Mom. I promise. Every single word is mine." Hye-jin nodded. "Then we will prove it. We will show them you are telling the truth." "How?" Minji asked. "They do not believe me. Mrs. Whitmore has already decided I am guilty." "Then we will make them believe," Hye-jin said. She looked tired, but her voice was firm. "You have worked too hard for this to end like this. We will fight." That evening, they sat together at the kitchen table and made a plan. Minji showed her mother everything. She showed her the research notes. She showed her the drafts of the paper. She showed her the sources she had used. But then Minji realized something. She had more proof than just her notes. She had her published papers, the ones she had written as MJ Park. Those papers used the same research methods, the same writing style, the same theoretical approach as the paper she had submitted to Mrs. Whitmore. "Mom," Minji said slowly, "I need to tell you something." She told her mother about her secret academic life, about the papers she had published in journals, about the research she had been doing for years, about MJ Park. Hee-jin listened with growing amazement. "You published real academic papers?" she asked. "In real journals?" "Yes," Minji said. 7 of them so far, and I have been working on another one." Hee-jin started to cry, but this time they were tears of pride, not sadness. "My daughter," she said, hugging Minji tight. "You are so smart, so very smart. Why did you not tell me?" "I was scared," Minji admitted. "I thought people would not take me seriously if they knew I was just a high school student. I thought they would reject my work." "And did they?" Hye-jin asked. "No," Minji said. "They published my work. Some professors have even cited my research in their own papers." Hye-jin wiped her eyes. "Then we will show the school these papers. We will prove that you are capable of writing at this level." The next day, Minji and Hye-jin went to the school for a meeting with Principal Harrison and Mrs. Whitmore. Minji brought printed copies of all her published papers. She brought letters from the journal editors accepting her work. She brought everything she could think of to prove her abilities. The meeting was in Principal Harrison's office. It was a small room with a desk, a few chairs, and certificates on the walls. Mrs. Whitmore sat in one chair, looking confident and stern. Hye-jin and Minji sat in two other chairs. Principal Harrison started the meeting. "Thank you for coming in today. We take plagiarism accusations very seriously. Mrs. Whitmore has raised concerns about the paper you submitted, Minji. She believes it is beyond your capabilities. That is because she has never paid attention to my capabilities," Minji said. She tried to keep her voice calm, but anger leaked through. "She has spent all year assuming I am not smart because of my accent." "That is not true," Mrs. Whitmore said quickly. "I treat all my students fairly. My concern is based purely on the quality of the work, which is suspiciously advanced." "It is not suspicious," Minji said. "It is just good work. I have been doing this kind of research for years." She pulled out the folder of her published papers and put them on Principal Harrison's desk. "These are academic papers I have written and published in linguistics journals," she explained. "If you read them, you will see they use the same research methods and writing style as the paper I submitted to Mrs. Whitmore." Principal Harrison picked up the papers and started reading. His eyebrows went up as he looked through them. "These are published in real academic journals?" "Yes," Minji said. "You can look up the journals online. You can verify that these papers are really published under my initials, MJ Park." Mrs. Whitmore leaned forward to look at the papers. Her face went pale as she read the titles. "This is impossible," she said. "These journals would not publish work from a high school student." "They published my work because it was good," Minji said. "They did not know I was in high school. I submitted under my initials. But you can contact the editors. They will confirm that MJ Park is me." Principal Harrison was still reading, flipping through page after page. "This is remarkable work," he said quietly. "The research is thorough. The analysis is sophisticated. The writing is clear and professional." "Thank you," Minji said. "That is exactly the kind of work I submitted to Mrs. Whitmore. My paper for her class was based on research I have been doing for months. It is real. It is mine. And accusing me of plagiarism is unfair and wrong." Mrs. Whitmore's face was getting redder. "Even if she did write these papers," she said, "that does not prove she wrote the paper for my class without help." "Who would help me?" Minji asked, turning to face her teacher. "My mother works 2 jobs just to pay rent. We cannot afford tutors. I do not have family members with PhDs. I did all of this work alone, in my tiny bedroom, with an old laptop that barely works. I did it because I love languages, and I am good at research." "But you never bothered to find that out, Mrs. Whitmore. You looked at me and saw only my accent. You never saw me." The room went quiet. Principal Harrison looked uncomfortable. Even Mrs. Whitmore seemed at a loss for words. "I think we need to verify this information," Principal Harrison finally said. "I will contact these journals to confirm publication. Mrs. Whitmore, I will also need to review Minji's grades in your class and compare them to her work quality." "What does that mean?" Mrs. Whitmore asked. "It means I need to make sure Minji has been graded fairly," he said. His voice was firmer now. "If she is capable of producing work at this level, I need to understand why her grades in your class have been only average." Mrs. Whitmore stood up quickly. "Are you questioning my professional judgment?" I am doing my job, Principal Harrison said. This is a serious situation. A student has been accused of plagiarism without evidence. That same student has now provided evidence of exceptional abilities. I need to investigate thoroughly. The meeting ended shortly after that. As Minji and her mother left the office, Mrs. Whitmore pushed past them in the hallway. She did not say a word, but the anger on her face was clear. What happens now? Hyejin asked as they walked to the bus stop. I do not know, Minji said. We wait, I guess. The waiting was the hardest part. Minji stayed home from school for 3 days while Principal Harrison investigated. She spent the time working on her research, trying to stay busy so she would not think about what might happen. On the 3rd day, Principal Harrison called. He asked Minji and Hyejin to come back to the school the next morning. He said he had finished his investigation. That night, Minji could not sleep. She kept imagining different outcomes. Maybe they would believe her, maybe they would not. Maybe she would be expelled. Maybe she would be vindicated. The next morning felt like walking to her own trial. Minji and Hyejin took the bus to school and went straight to the principal's office. This time, Mrs. Whitmore was not there. It was just Principal Harrison. He looked tired, like he had not slept well either. Please sit down, he said. They sat. Minji's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. I have completed my investigation, Principal Harrison began. I contacted all the journals where your papers were published. They confirmed that MJ Park is you. They confirmed that you are the sole author of all those papers. The editors were quite surprised to learn you are only 16 years old. Minji felt a tiny bit of relief, but she stayed quiet. I also compared your paper to your published work, he continued. The writing style is consistent. The research methods are the same. There is no doubt in my mind that you wrote the paper yourself. So I am not in trouble? Minji asked. No, Principal Harrison said. You are not in trouble. The plagiarism accusation was false. I am formally clearing you of all charges. Minji felt like she could breathe again for the first time in days. Hyejin grabbed her hand and squeezed it tight. However, Principal Harrison continued, my investigation revealed other concerns. What concerns? Hyejin asked. Principal Harrison pulled out a file. I reviewed Minji's grades in Mrs. Whitmore's class and compared them to her actual work. I found significant discrepancies. Minji's papers and tests are consistently excellent, but her participation grades are very low. Mrs. Whitmore also made comments on Minji's work that seemed to focus on language issues rather than content quality. He opened the file and showed them examples. There were Minji's essays marked with red pen, comments like unclear expression and work on pronunciation, and language barrier evident. But when Principal Harrison had asked other English teachers to review the same essays, they had found them to be excellent. It appears, Principal Harrison said carefully, that Minji has been graded unfairly in Mrs. Whitmore's class, not because of the quality of her work, but because of bias. What does that mean? Minji asked. Minji. It means Mrs. Whitmore will no longer be your teacher, he said. I am transferring you to another English class immediately. I am also going to review Mrs. Whitmore's treatment of other students to see if there is a pattern of discrimination. Minji could hardly believe what she was hearing. She was being moved to a different class. Mrs. Whitmore was being investigated. After months of humiliation and unfair treatment, someone was finally taking her seriously. What about my paper? Minji asked. The one I submitted for the research project? Principal Harrison smiled. It was the first time Minji had seen him smile. Your paper will receive the grade it deserves, which, based on my reading and the opinions of other teachers I consulted, is an A+. It is exceptional work, Minji. You should be very proud. Minji felt tears coming, but this time they were good tears. Thank you, she said. Thank you for believing me. I should have investigated sooner, Principal Harrison said. I am sorry you had to go through this. No student should be treated the way you were treated. As they left the office, Minji felt lighter than she had in months. The nightmare was over. She had been vindicated. The truth had come out. But there was something else too. Something unexpected. As she and her mother walked down the school hallway, Principal Harrison called after them. "Minji, wait, there is one more thing." They turned back. "While I was verifying your published work, I contacted some of the journal editors," he said. "One of them mentioned that a professor at Harvard had been trying to contact MJ Park. Apparently, your research has attracted attention from Harvard's linguistics department." Minji's eyes went wide. "Harvard?" "Yes," Principal Harrison said. "The editor gave me a name and email address. He said the professor has been trying to reach you for several weeks. I think you should contact them." He handed Minji a piece of paper with a name. Professor David Chen, Harvard Department of Linguistics. Minji stared at the paper. Harvard. One of the best universities in the world. They were trying to contact her. "This is amazing," Hyejin said, reading over Minji's shoulder. Her English was good enough to understand what the paper said. "You have an extraordinary gift, Minji," Principal Harrison said. "Do not let anyone make you doubt that again." Minji and Hyejin walked out of the school in a daze. Everything had changed so quickly. 3 days ago, Minji had been accused of cheating and suspended from school. Now, she was cleared, moved to a new class, and apparently being sought by Harvard University. "What will you do?" Hyejin asked as they waited for the bus. "I will email Professor Chen," Minji said. "I want to know why Harvard is interested in my work." That evening, Minji sat at her laptop and composed an email. Her hands were shaking as she typed. "Dear Professor Chen," she wrote. "My name is Minji Park. I am the researcher who publishes under the name MJ Park. I was told you have been trying to contact me. I apologize for the delay in responding. I would be honored to discuss my work with you." She read the email 10 times before hitting send. Then she closed her laptop and waited. The reply came faster than she expected. The next morning, there was an email from Professor Chen in her inbox. "Dear Minji," it said, "thank you for reaching out. I have been reading your research with great interest. Your work on sociolinguistic patterns is groundbreaking. I had no idea the author was a high school student. That makes your achievements even more remarkable. I would like to discuss your research and potential opportunities at Harvard. Would you be available for a phone call?" Minji read the email 3 times to make sure it was real. A professor from Harvard wanted to talk to her. He called her work groundbreaking. He wanted to discuss opportunities. She replied immediately, saying yes, she would love to talk. 2 days later, her phone rang. It was Professor Chen. They talked for over an hour. He asked about her research methods, her interests, her goals. He told her that her papers had been cited by other researchers. He said her work was contributing to the field in meaningful ways. At the end of the call, he said something that changed Minji's life. "We have a summer program for exceptional young linguists," he said. "It is normally for college students, but I would like to make an exception for you. Would you be interested in spending the summer at Harvard, working with our research team?" Minji could not speak for a moment. She could not believe this was real. "Yes," she finally managed to say. "Yes, I would love that." "Excellent," Professor Chen said. "I will send you the details. Oh, and Minji, your latest paper, the one about accent discrimination in classrooms, I would like to publish it in our quarterly journal. It is important work. People need to read it." After the call ended, Minji sat in stunned silence. Everything had changed. The girl who had been mocked for her accent was going to Harvard. The student who had been accused of plagiarism was going to be published in a prestigious journal. The teenager who was told she was not smart enough was being recognized as a genius. She thought about Mrs. Whitmore. She thought about all the times the teacher had made her feel small and stupid. She thought about the humiliation and the pain, but she also thought about how she had fought back, how she had refused to accept being dismissed, how she had used her intelligence as a weapon. Minji smiled. The battle was not over yet. There was still more to come. But for now, she had won. Word spread through Jefferson High School faster than fire. Minji Park, the quiet girl with the accent that some students had mocked, was being recognized by Harvard University. The girl that Mrs. Whitmore had accused of plagiarism was actually a published researcher. The student who had been told to take ESL classes was a genius. Students who had never spoken to Minji before suddenly wanted to talk to her. They stopped her in hallways. They sat near her at lunch. They asked questions about Harvard and her research. "Is it true you published papers in real journals?" a girl named Ashley asked. She was one of the popular students who had laughed during Minji's presentation that terrible day. "Yes," Minji said simply. "That is so cool," Ashley said. "I had no idea you were so smart." Minji wanted to say that she had always been smart, that her intelligence had never changed, only people's perception of her had changed. But she just nodded and said thank you. Jiwon, her best friend, was thrilled. "You are famous now," Jiwon said at lunch. "Everyone is talking about you." "I do not want to be famous," Minji said. "I just want people to take me seriously." "Well, they definitely do now," Jiwon said. "Even the teachers are talking about you. I heard Mrs. Bradley in the math department telling everyone about your research papers." Minji had been moved to Mrs. Bradley's English class, and it was completely different from Mrs. Whitmore's class. Mrs. Bradley actually listened when Minji spoke. She valued Minji's insights. She gave feedback that was helpful rather than critical. For the first time all year, Minji actually enjoyed English class. But the biggest change was happening behind the scenes. Principal Harrison's investigation into Mrs. Whitmore had revealed a disturbing pattern. Minji was not the only student who had been treated unfairly. Devin Chen, a student whose family had immigrated from Taiwan, came forward with his own story. Mrs. Whitmore had consistently given him lower grades than his work deserved. She had made comments about his broken English, even though he had been born in America and spoke perfect English. Maria Santos, whose family was from the Philippines, reported similar treatment. So did Ahmed Hassan, whose family was from Egypt, and Jinsu Kim, whose family was from South Korea like Minji's. The pattern was clear. Mrs. Whitmore treated students from immigrant families differently. She graded them more harshly. She made assumptions about their abilities based on their names and backgrounds. She created an environment where these students felt they had to work twice as hard just to be seen as half as good. Principal Harrison called another meeting. This time it was not just Minji and her mother. It was all the students who had been affected, along with their families. The conference room was packed. Minji sat next to Hyejin, surrounded by other students and parents who all shared similar stories. They talked about comments that had been made, grades that seemed unfair, the constant feeling of being dismissed or underestimated. One parent, Mr. Hassan, was particularly angry. "My son has wanted to be a writer since he was 6 years old," he said. Mrs. Whitmore told him that English literature was not for people like him. She suggested he focus on math and science instead, because those subjects did not require as much language skill. "She tried to kill my son's dream." Principal Harrison took notes on everything. His face grew more serious as the meeting went on. "This is unacceptable," he said. "I want to apologize to all of you on behalf of Jefferson High School. This should never have happened." "An apology is not enough," Mrs. Santos said. "What will you do about it?" "Mrs. Whitmore has been suspended pending a formal review," Principal Harrison said. "The school board will make a final decision about her employment. But I can tell you that the evidence of discriminatory behavior is overwhelming. I will be recommending termination." The room was quiet for a moment. Then Mr. Chen spoke. "What about our children's grades? Devin's GPA has been hurt by the unfair grades in Mrs. Whitmore's class. That affects college applications. All grades from Mrs. Whitmore's classes are being reviewed," Principal Harrison said. "If we find evidence that grades were affected by bias, those grades will be corrected. We will also provide letters to colleges explaining the situation, if needed." As the meeting ended, the parents and students lingered to talk to each other. They shared contact information. They talked about forming a support group. They discussed ways to prevent this from happening to other students in the future. Minji felt a strange sense of community. She had spent so much time feeling alone in her struggles. She had thought she was the only one, but she was not alone. There were others who understood exactly what she had been through. Devin Chen came over to talk to her. I heard about your research papers, he said. That is amazing. You are like a hero now. I am not a hero, Minji said. I just did my work. You did more than that, Devon said. You stood up to her. You proved her wrong. You made it possible for the rest of us to come forward. That makes you a hero to me. Over the next few weeks, more details emerged. Local news picked up the story. Harvard discovers teen genius after teacher's racist accusations was the headline in the local paper. The story went viral on social media. People from around the country commented, sharing their own experiences with discrimination in schools. Reporters tried to interview Minji, but Principal Harrison protected her. He said Minji was a minor, and the family wanted privacy. But he did make a public statement on behalf of the school. Jefferson High School is committed to providing a fair and inclusive education for all students, he said. We take accusations of discrimination very seriously. We are implementing new training for all staff to prevent incidents like this in the future. We are also establishing a scholarship in Minji Park's name to support students from underrepresented communities. Meanwhile, Minji was preparing for her summer at Harvard. Professor Chen sent her reading materials and research plans. He introduced her via email to other members of the linguistics department. He told her about the projects she would work on. You will be working alongside graduate students and postdoctoral researchers, he wrote in one email. I know you will keep up with them. Your work is already at that level. Minji read that email over and over. A year ago, Mrs. Whitmore had told her she should focus on basic English skills. Now, a Harvard professor was saying her work was at a graduate level. The contrast was almost funny. But there was still one more thing that needed to happen. The school board hearing for Mrs. Whitmore was scheduled for a Tuesday in May. Students and parents were invited to attend and provide testimony. Minji had to decide whether to go. Part of her wanted to move on and forget about Mrs. Whitmore. But another part of her knew that speaking up was important, not just for herself, but for future students who might face similar treatment. You do not have to go, Hyejin said. You have already done so much. I know, Minji said, but I want to go. I want to tell my story. I want them to understand what she did to me, to all of us. The day of the hearing arrived. Minji wore her best dress. It was not expensive, but it was clean and neat. Hyejin took the day off work to go with her. The school board meeting room was full. All the students and families from the conference were there. There were also teachers from the school, including Mrs. Bradley. There were community members who had read about the case in the news, and there was Mrs. Whitmore sitting at a table with a lawyer. The hearing began with Principal Harrison presenting his findings. He showed documentation of grade discrepancies. He presented testimony from students and parents. He showed emails where Mrs. Whitmore had made inappropriate comments about students' language abilities. Then it was time for students to speak. Devon Chen went first. He talked about how Mrs. Whitmore had discouraged his dreams of being a writer. He talked about the comments she had made about his background. He talked about how her class had made him doubt his own abilities. Maria Santos spoke next. Then Ahmed Hassan. Then Jin-Soo Kim. Each student shared their story. Each story was different in details but similar in substance. Mrs. Whitmore had made them feel less than. She had treated them unfairly. She had let bias affect her professional judgment. Finally, it was Minji's turn to speak. She walked to the front of the room. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. My name is Minji Park, she began. I am 16 years old. I came to America when I was 8. English is my second language, and I have an accent that you can probably hear. She paused and looked around the room. Some people were nodding. Everyone was paying attention. For a year, I was in Mrs. Whitmore's English literature class, Minji continued. During that time, she mocked my accent in front of other students. She told me I should take ESL classes instead of advanced classes. She suggested to my mother that I was not smart enough for the coursework. And when I wrote an excellent research paper, she accused me of plagiarism because she could not believe I was capable of such work. Minji's voice grew stronger as she spoke. The nervousness was fading, replaced by conviction. But here is the truth that Mrs. Whitmore never bothered to discover. I have published 7 academic papers in linguistics journals. I have been cited by university professors. Harvard University has invited me to join their summer research program. And my paper on accent discrimination in classrooms, the one Mrs. Whitmore thought I could not possibly have written, is being published in the Harvard Linguistics Journal. There were gasps in the audience. Even though many people knew parts of Minji's story, hearing it all together was powerful. I am not telling you this to brag, Minji said. I am telling you this because Mrs. Whitmore looked at me and made assumptions. She saw my accent and decided I was not intelligent. She saw my background and decided I was not capable. She never gave me a chance to show her who I really was. And that is not just unfair to me. It is unfair to every student who does not fit her narrow idea of what a good student looks like. Minji looked directly at Mrs. Whitmore. The teacher's face was red, but she did not meet Minji's eyes. I have worked hard my whole life, Minji said. My mother works 2 jobs so I can have opportunities. I study late every night. I do not have money for tutors or test prep or any of the advantages that many students have. But I have a brilliant mind and a love of learning. That should be enough. That should always be enough. She turned back to the school board members. What Mrs. Whitmore did to me was wrong, but more importantly, what she did to all of us was wrong. She let prejudice affect how she taught. She let bias determine who she encouraged and who she dismissed. And because of that, students suffered. Dreams were crushed. Potential was wasted. That cannot continue. Minji returned to her seat. The room was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Then another person. Soon, the whole room was applauding. Mrs. Whitmore's lawyer stood up to speak in her defense. He talked about her 20 years of service. He said she had never been in trouble before. He suggested that this was all a misunderstanding, that Mrs. Whitmore had high standards and some students had misinterpreted her feedback. But the evidence was too strong. The pattern was too clear. When the school board members asked Mrs. Whitmore if she had anything to say, she stood up slowly. I have dedicated my career to education, she said. I have always tried to maintain high standards. If some students felt I was too demanding, I am sorry they felt that way. But I was only trying to prepare them for the real world. It was not really an apology, it was an excuse. She was still not taking responsibility for what she had done. The school board deliberated for less than an hour. When they returned, the decision was clear. After reviewing all the evidence and testimony, the board president said, We have decided to terminate Mrs. Catherine Whitmore's employment with Jefferson High School, effective immediately. The evidence of discriminatory behavior is overwhelming and undeniable. This kind of treatment of students is completely unacceptable. Mrs. Whitmore stood up quickly, her face showing shock and anger. Her lawyer tried to say something, but she pushed past him and left the room. As people filed out of the hearing, many of them stopped to talk to Minji. Teachers congratulated her. Parents thanked her for speaking up. Students hugged her. You did it, Jiwon said, hugging Minji tight. You actually did it. We all did it, Minji said, looking around at the other students and families. Together. That evening, Minji and Hyejin took the bus home. They were both exhausted, but also relieved. It was finally over. The battle had been won. I am so proud of you, Hyejin said in Korean. Your father would be proud too. Minji leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. We did good, Mom. We fought back and we won. Yes, Hyejin said. We did. When they got home, Minji checked her email. There was a message from Professor Chen. Dear Minji, it read. I saw the news coverage of the school board hearing. I want you to know that the entire linguistics department at Harvard is impressed by your courage and integrity. You stood up for what was right, even when it was difficult. That takes character. We are honored that you will be joining us this summer. You are going to do great things. Minji smiled as she read the email. A year ago, she had been humiliated in front of her class. She had been told she was not good enough. She had been made to feel ashamed of who she was. But she had not given up. She had not let them break her. Instead, she had proven them wrong in the most powerful way possible. She had shown the world her brilliance. And this was just the beginning. 3 months passed quickly. Spring turned to summer, and suddenly it was time for Minji to go to Harvard. The summer program started in early June and would last for 8 weeks. 8 weeks of working with real linguists. 8 weeks of being surrounded by people who loved language as much as she did. 8 weeks at one of the most prestigious universities in the world. Heejin had saved money for months to help with expenses. The program provided housing and meals, but there were other costs: plane tickets, books, supplies. Minji tried to tell her mother not to worry, but Heejin insisted. "This is your dream," Heejin said. "I will make it happen." The night before Minji left, they had a special dinner. Just the two of them in their small apartment. Heejin made all of Minji's favorite foods. They ate slowly, savoring the time together. "I will miss you," Heejin said. Her eyes were wet with tears. "I will miss you too, Mom," Minji said. "But I will call you every day, and I will be back before you know it." "You are going to change the world," Heejin said. "I know it." The next morning, they took the bus to the airport. At the gate, Heejin hugged Minji tight. "Remember who you are," she said in Korean. "Remember where you came from. Be proud of your voice, your accent, everything that makes you you." "I will, Mom. I promise." Minji boarded the plane with her small suitcase and backpack. Everything she owned fit into those 2 bags. As the plane took off, she looked out the window at the city getting smaller below. She was leaving behind everything familiar, but she was also flying toward her future. When the plane landed in Boston, Minji felt her stomach flutter with nerves. She had never been to Boston before. She had never been away from her mother before. Everything was new and strange. A van from Harvard was waiting to take summer program students to campus. Minji climbed in with 5 other students. They all looked older than her. They were college students from various universities. They talked about their majors and research interests using words that Minji understood, but had never spoken aloud. "What school are you from?" A girl with red hair asked Minji. "Jefferson High School," Minji said, "in California." The girl looked confused. "High school? Are you doing a college preview program or something?" "No," Minji said. "I am in the linguistics research program." "But that is for college students," another student said. "Professor Chen made an exception for me," Minji explained. The students looked at her with new interest. "You must be really good then," the red-haired girl said. "I am Emma, by the way. I am a junior at Boston University." "I am Minji," she said. "Nice to meet you." When they arrived at Harvard, Minji could hardly believe she was really there. The campus was beautiful. Old brick buildings covered in ivy. Wide green lawns where students sat reading. The sense of history and learning was everywhere. The van dropped them at a dormitory where summer program students would stay. Minji got her room assignment and key. She was sharing a room with another student named Sarah, who was a graduate student from Ohio State. The room was small but comfortable, much nicer than Minji's bedroom at home. There were 2 beds, 2 desks, and a window overlooking the campus. Sarah had already arrived and was unpacking her things. "Hi," Sarah said when Minji entered. "You must be my roommate. I am Sarah." "I am Minji. Nice to meet you." "Are you in the linguistics program too?" Sarah asked. "Yes," Minji said. "Cool. What is your focus?" "I am studying syntax and language acquisition." "I study sociolinguistics," Minji said, "especially accent discrimination and linguistic bias." Sarah's eyes lit up. "Oh wow, are you MJ Park? The one who wrote those papers on accent patterns in bilingual speakers?" Minji nodded, surprised. "You know my work?" "Know it? I cited it in my thesis," Sarah said. "Your research on phonetic transfer patterns was super helpful for my work." "I cannot believe you are my roommate. This is so cool." For the first time since arriving, Minji relaxed. Maybe this would be okay. Maybe she would fit in here. That evening, there was an orientation meeting for all summer program participants. About 30 students gathered in a lecture hall. Professor Chen stood at the front along with another professor, Dr. Sarah Williams. "Welcome to Harvard's Summer Linguistics Program," Professor Chen said. "You are here because you have demonstrated exceptional ability in linguistic research. Over the next 8 weeks, you will work on cutting-edge research projects. You will collaborate with faculty and with each other. You will push the boundaries of what we know about language. He looked around the room. I want to introduce someone special. Minji Park, can you stand up? Minji felt her face grow hot as she stood. Everyone turned to look at her. Minji is the youngest participant we have ever had in this program, Professor Chen said. She is 16 years old and just finished her junior year of high school, but her research is already being cited by scholars around the world. She has published 7 papers under the name M.J. Park. Many of you have probably read her work without knowing the author was a teenager. There were whispers around the room. Students looked at Minji with surprise and curiosity. Minji is proof that brilliant research can come from anywhere, Professor Chen continued. Age does not matter. Credentials do not matter. What matters is good ideas backed by solid evidence. That is what we value here. After the orientation, several students came up to introduce themselves to Minji. They asked about her research. They shared their own projects. They invited her to join study groups and coffee meetings. Do not let the age thing intimidate you, a student named Marcus said. He was a PhD candidate from Stanford. If Professor Chen thinks you belong here, you belong here. Just do your work and speak up. We are all here to learn from each other. The next morning, the real work began. Minji was assigned to work on a research project about linguistic discrimination in professional settings. She would be working with Professor Chen and 2 graduate students, analyzing data from workplace communications. The first meeting was in Professor Chen's office. It was a small room filled with books and papers. The 2 graduate students, Lisa and James, were already there when Minji arrived. Great. We are all here, Professor Chen said. Let us talk about the project. We have collected email communications from several companies. We want to analyze how language use affects perceptions of competence and professionalism. We will look at factors like accent markers in written English, use of formal versus informal language, and how these factors correlate with career advancement. He turned to Minji. Minji, I think your background in accent discrimination will be valuable here. We are looking at a similar phenomenon in written rather than spoken communication. They spent the next 2 hours discussing methodology. Minji listened carefully at first, trying to understand the project. But then Professor Chen asked for her input on the statistical analysis plan. Minji took a deep breath. She could do this. I think we should use a mixed methods approach, she said. Quantitative analysis of the language patterns combined with qualitative analysis of the responses. We could also look at intersectional factors like name, ethnicity, and company culture. Professor Chen smiled. Exactly what I was thinking. Lisa, James, what do you think? I agree, Lisa said. We could use cluster analysis to identify patterns in the data. And maybe some regression modeling to look at correlation with promotion rates, James added. They talked for another hour, planning the research. Minji contributed ideas freely. She felt nervous at first, worried that her ideas would sound stupid compared to the graduate students. But Professor Chen and the others treated her as an equal. They built on her suggestions. They asked her opinion. They valued her input. This was what Minji had always wanted. To be in a room full of people who loved language as much as she did. To work on research that mattered. To be taken seriously for her ideas rather than judged for her accent or background. Over the next few weeks, Minji fell into a routine. She spent mornings working on the research project with Professor Chen's team. She attended lectures and seminars in the afternoons. She spent evenings reading research papers and working on her own projects. The work was hard, much harder than anything she had done in high school. There were days when she felt overwhelmed, days when she wondered if she really belonged there. But there were also moments of pure joy, moments when she discovered something new, moments when her ideas contributed to real research, moments when she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. One afternoon, about 3 weeks into the program, Professor Chen called Minji into his office for a one-on-one meeting. I wanted to check in with you, he said. How are you finding the program? It is amazing, Minji said honestly. Hard, but amazing. I am learning so much. You are doing excellent work, Professor Chen said. Lisa and James have both told me how impressed they are with your contributions to the research. Your ideas about intersectional analysis opened up a whole new dimension to our project. Thank you, Minji said. That means a lot. Professor Chen leaned back in his chair. Can I ask you something? How did you develop such advanced research skills at such a young age? Most high school students are not even thinking about academic research. Minji told him the whole story. About discovering linguistics when she was 12. About teaching herself research methods from online resources and library books. About publishing papers in small journals under her initials because she was afraid of being dismissed for her age. She also told him about Mrs. Whitmore, about the mockery and discrimination, about the plagiarism accusation, about fighting back and eventually being vindicated. Professor Chen listened without interrupting. When Minji finished, he was quiet for a moment. That teacher did you a terrible disservice, he finally said. But in a way, she also did you a favor. She pushed you to prove yourself. She gave you motivation to pursue your research seriously. Obviously, I wish you had not had to go through that. No student should face discrimination, but you turned that pain into something powerful. I guess so, Minji said. I just wish it had not been necessary. I know, Professor Chen said. But you are here now, and I want you to know something. We are publishing your paper on accent discrimination in the classroom in our fall journal issue. It will reach thousands of educators and researchers. Your voice will be heard. Your experience will help other students. Really? Minji asked. She had known the paper would be published, but hearing it confirmed still felt surreal. Really, Professor Chen said, and there is something else. I have been talking with the admissions department. We would like to offer you early admission to Harvard. You would start as a freshman after you graduate from high school, full scholarship, everything covered. Minji could not speak. She just stared at Professor Chen, trying to process what he had just said. You do not have to answer now, he said quickly. I know it is a big decision. Talk to your mother. Think about it. But I want you to know that Harvard wants you. The linguistics department wants you. I want you to be here. That night, Minji called her mother. She had been calling every day like she promised, but this call was different. Mom, she said in Korean, you are not going to believe what happened. She told Hyejin everything, about the research project, about Professor Chen's words of praise, about the early admission offer, about the full scholarship. Hyejin started crying on the other end of the phone. My daughter, she said, my brilliant daughter. I am so proud of you. So very proud. I could not have done it without you, Mom, Minji said. You worked so hard so I could have opportunities. You never gave up on me. This is your achievement too. No, Hyejin said. This is your achievement. You did this. Your hard work, your brilliant mind, your determination. I just gave you love and support. The rest was all you. They talked for over an hour. They cried together. They laughed together. They dreamed together about the future. When Minji finally hung up, she sat in her dorm room and looked out the window at the Harvard campus. Less than a year ago, she had been a girl that a teacher mocked for her accent. A student who was told she was not smart enough. A teenager who felt invisible and dismissed. Now she was here, at Harvard, doing real research, being offered admission to one of the best universities in the world. Sarah came into the room and saw Minji's face. You okay? She asked. I am more than okay, Minji said. I just got offered early admission to Harvard, full scholarship. Sarah screamed and hugged her. That is amazing. We are going to be classmates. This is the best news ever. That night, Emma organized a celebration in the common room. Students brought snacks and drinks. Someone made a cake with "Congratulations, Minji" written in icing. They all gathered to celebrate. Speech, someone called out. Minji stood up, feeling shy but also happy. She looked around at all these people who had accepted her and respected her. People who valued her mind and her work. Thank you all, she said. A year ago, I did not think I belonged anywhere. I felt like I had to hide who I was to be accepted. But here, I can be myself. I can be brilliant and have an accent. I can be young and also be taken seriously. I can be from a poor family and still have incredible opportunities. Thank you for seeing me for who I really am." Everyone clapped. Some people had tears in their eyes. "You inspire all of us," Marcus said. "You show us that anything is possible if you work hard and believe in yourself." As the party continued, Minji stepped outside for a moment. She needed some air. She needed to process everything that was happening. She stood on the lawn outside the dorm and looked up at the stars. She thought about her father, who she barely remembered, but who had given her a gift for languages. She thought about her mother, working night shifts so Minji could have books and a laptop. She thought about Ji-won, who had stood by her when others laughed. She thought about all the people who had believed in her, but mostly she thought about herself, about the girl who had refused to be broken, who had turned humiliation into motivation, who had proven that she was extraordinary, no matter what anyone said. "Thank you," she whispered to the stars, to her father, to the universe, to whatever force had given her this brilliant mind and the courage to use it. Tomorrow the work would continue. There would be more research, more learning, more growing. But tonight, she would just enjoy this moment. This perfect moment when everything had finally come together. Minji Park was exactly where she belonged. The news about Mrs. Whitmore's termination spread beyond Jefferson High School. Local media covered the story. Then national media picked it up. Soon, educational websites and magazines were writing articles about accent discrimination in schools, using Minji's story as a central example. Mrs. Catherine Whitmore found herself at the center of a national conversation about bias in education, and she did not like it. She tried to find another teaching position, but everywhere she applied, the hiring committee had questions. They had seen the news coverage. They had read about the school board hearing. They wanted to know her side of the story. Mrs. Whitmore told herself she had done nothing wrong. She had maintained high standards. She had tried to help students succeed. If some students were too sensitive, that was not her fault. But deep down, in moments of honesty, she rarely allowed herself she knew the truth. She had let her biases affect her teaching. She had made assumptions about students based on their accents and backgrounds. She had been unfair. The question was whether she would admit it. Meanwhile, back at Jefferson High School, things were changing. Principal Harrison had formed a committee to review school policies on discrimination and bias. He brought in diversity consultants to train teachers. He established a reporting system so students could safely report concerns about unfair treatment. The school also created the Minji Park Scholarship, just as Principal Harrison had promised. It would provide financial support and mentorship to students from immigrant families who showed exceptional academic promise. The first recipient would be chosen the following year. But the biggest change was in the students themselves. What had happened to Minji and the others had opened people's eyes. Students who had never thought about discrimination before now recognized it. They spoke up when they saw it. They supported classmates who faced unfair treatment. Devin Chen started a student organization called Voices for Equity. They met weekly to discuss issues of fairness and inclusion in the school. They organized events to celebrate different cultures and languages. They created a peer support network for students who felt marginalized. "Minji inspired us," Devin told a reporter who came to cover the student organization. "She showed us that one person speaking up can make a difference. We want to make sure no other student has to go through what she went through." Back at Harvard, Minji's summer was coming to an end. The research project with Professor Chen was wrapping up. They had completed their analysis and were writing up the results for publication. Minji had contributed significantly to both the analysis and the writing. "You are listed as second author on this paper," Professor Chen told her. "That is a major achievement for anyone, let alone a high school student. This will be published in a top-tier journal. You should be very proud." Minji was proud, but she was also thinking about what came next. She would be returning home soon. Back to Jefferson High for her senior year. Back to regular life. Except her life would never be regular again. She had been offered admission to Harvard. She had been published in major academic journals. She had been recognized nationally. Everything had changed. On the last day of the program, there was a final presentation where students shared their summer research. Minji stood in front of the group and talked about the workplace discrimination project. She showed their data, explained their methods, described their findings. She spoke clearly and confidently. Her accent was still there, but nobody cared. They were too interested in what she was saying. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Professor Chen stood up. Before we conclude today, I want to say something. Minji Park came to us as the youngest participant we have ever had in this program. Some people questioned whether she was ready for this level of work. But Minji has not just kept up with graduate students. She has excelled. She has taught us as much as we have taught her. She has shown us that brilliance has no age limit, no accent requirement, no background prerequisite. Minji, you have been an inspiration to all of us. More applause. Minji felt tears in her eyes, but they were happy tears. That evening, there was a farewell dinner for program participants. Students exchanged contact information and promised to stay in touch. Sarah gave Minji a book about advanced statistical methods. For when you come back as a freshman, she said with a smile. Emma wrote her email address on a napkin. Email me anytime, she said. I mean it. You are going to do amazing things, and I want to hear about all of them. Marcus shook Minji's hand seriously. You are going to change the field, he said. I am going to tell people I knew you before you were famous. The next morning, Minji packed her bags and took the van back to the airport. As the plane took off, she looked down at the campus getting smaller below. She had spent 8 weeks there, but it felt like a lifetime. She was not the same person who had arrived in June. She had grown. She had learned. She had become more confident in her own abilities. When the plane landed in California, Hyejin was waiting at the airport. She had taken time off work to pick up Minji. When Minji came through the gate, Hyejin ran to her and hugged her tight. I missed you so much, Hyejin said in Korean. I missed you too, Mom. They took the bus home and Minji told her mother all about the summer, about the research, the new friends, the classes, everything. Hyejin listened with pride shining in her eyes. Back at their small apartment, everything looked exactly the same. But Minji felt different. She had seen a bigger world. She had experienced what she was capable of. She had glimpsed her future. Senior year started 2 weeks later. Minji walked into Jefferson High School with her head held high. Students and teachers who knew her story greeted her warmly. Some asked about Harvard. Some asked about her research. Everyone treated her with new respect. Mrs. Bradley, her new English teacher, welcomed her to class with a genuine smile. I am so glad to have you in my class this year, Minji, she said. I have read some of your work. You are an exceptional student. Thank you, Minji said. About a month into the school year, Principal Harrison called Minji to his office. When she arrived, she found him with a visitor, a woman with gray hair and a tired face. It took Minji a moment to recognize her. Mrs. Whitmore. Minji's body tensed. What was she doing here? Please sit down, Minji, Principal Harrison said gently. Mrs. Whitmore asked to speak with you. You do not have to if you do not want to. Minji looked at her former teacher. Mrs. Whitmore looked older than she had last spring. The confidence and arrogance were gone. She just looked tired and sad. I will listen, Minji said carefully. Mrs. Whitmore took a deep breath. Minji, I owe you an apology, she said. Her voice was quiet and shaky. What I did to you was wrong. I let my biases affect how I treated you. I made assumptions about your abilities based on your accent and your background. I was unfair and cruel. I am sorry. Minji waited. There had to be more. I have spent the past few months in therapy, Mrs. Whitmore continued, trying to understand why I acted the way I did. I grew up in a different time. I learned prejudices that I never questioned. I thought I was being objective and fair, but I was not. I hurt you and other students. I destroyed my own career, and I have to live with that. She looked directly at Minji. I am not asking for your forgiveness. I do not deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I am sorry, and that what happened was not your fault. You did nothing wrong. You are brilliant and talented, and you deserve every success you achieve." The room was silent. Minji did not know what to say. She had imagined confronting Mrs. Whitmore many times. In her imagination, she had been angry and powerful, telling her teacher exactly what she thought of her. But now, sitting here with this broken woman, she just felt tired. "Thank you for the apology," Minji finally said. "I appreciate that you are trying to change. I hope you succeed. But you are right. What you did was wrong. You hurt me and others. You have to live with that." Mrs. Whitmore nodded. Tears ran down her face. "I know, I'm so sorry." She stood up to leave. At the door, she turned back. "For what it is worth, I read about your achievements. Harvard, your publications. You are extraordinary. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about so many things." After she left, Principal Harrison spoke. "You did not have to meet with her. I want you to know that." "I know," Minji said, "but I wanted to hear what she had to say." "How do you feel?" he asked. Minji thought about it. "I feel like a chapter is closing." She apologized, but that does not change what happened. It does not erase the pain. But maybe it is a start for her to be better, for her to not hurt other students in the future. "You are very wise," Principal Harrison said. "Much wiser than most adults I know." A few weeks later, Minji was invited to speak at a school assembly. Principal Harrison thought it would be good for students to hear her story directly, to understand what she had been through and what she had achieved. Minji was nervous about speaking in front of the whole school, but she also knew it was important. Her story could help other students who felt dismissed or underestimated. The day of the assembly arrived. The entire school gathered in the auditorium. Over 1,000 students and all the teachers. Minji stood backstage, her hands shaking. Ji-won squeezed her hand. "You are going to be great," she said. Principal Harrison introduced her. "Today we have a very special speaker, a student who has shown incredible courage, brilliance, and resilience. Many of you know her story. She faced discrimination and fought back with intelligence and determination. She has been published in academic journals. She has been accepted to Harvard with a full scholarship, and she is still just a senior in high school. Please welcome Minji Park." Minji walked onto the stage. The spotlight was bright. She could see hundreds of faces looking up at her. She took a deep breath and began to speak. "My name is Minji Park," she said. Her voice was steady despite her nerves. "I am 17 years old. I came to America when I was 8. I have an accent when I speak English. And last year a teacher told me that I was not smart enough for advanced classes." She paused, letting that sink in. "But I am smart enough, more than smart enough. I have published 7 academic papers. I have been accepted to Harvard University. I spent this summer doing research with graduate students. I am exactly as capable as any student in this school, maybe more capable than some." She looked around the auditorium. Some students were nodding. Some looked uncomfortable. "I am not telling you this to brag," Minji continued. "I am telling you this because every day students in schools across America are told they are not good enough. They are told this because of their accent, because of their skin color, because of where they come from, because of how much money their families have, and it is wrong." Her voice grew stronger. "You do not get to decide someone's intelligence based on how they sound. You do not get to determine someone's worth based on their background. Every student deserves to be judged by their work, their effort, their ideas, not by stereotypes or assumptions." Minji talked about her experience with Mrs. Whitmore. She did not sugarcoat it. She described the mockery, the humiliation, the plagiarism accusation. She described how it felt to be dismissed and underestimated. "But I refuse to let one person's bias define me," she said. "I worked harder. I did my research. I proved my abilities. And eventually, the truth came out." She talked about the other students who had been affected. Devin and Maria and Ahmed and Jin Soo. She talked about how they had supported each other, how they had spoken up together. "Change does not happen by being silent," Minji said. "Change happens when we speak up. when we demand fairness, when we refuse to accept discrimination. She looked out at the students. If you are being treated unfairly, speak up. Tell someone. Report it. You do not have to accept it. And if you see someone else being treated unfairly, speak up for them. Be an ally. Use your voice. Minji talked about her time at Harvard, about being surrounded by people who valued her mind, about working on research that mattered, about finding her place. We all deserve to find our place, she said. We all deserve to be valued for who we really are. Your accent does not make you less intelligent. Your background does not limit your potential. Your differences make you unique and valuable. She looked directly at the teachers in the audience. And to the educators here, you have power over young people's lives. You can build them up or tear them down. You can open doors or close them. Please use that power wisely. Please see every student for who they really are. Please do not let bias affect how you teach. Minji's voice softened. Last year I felt invisible in this school. I felt like I did not matter. But I do matter. Every student matters. And we all deserve to be seen, heard, and valued. She finished speaking, and the auditorium was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Then more people. Soon the entire school was on their feet, applauding. Minji stood on the stage, overwhelmed by the response. She had shared her pain, her struggle, her triumph. And people had listened. Really listened. As she left the stage, students came up to her. Some thanked her for speaking up. Some shared their own stories of discrimination. Some just wanted to shake her hand. "You are my hero," a freshman girl said. She had a thick accent, probably recent immigrant. "I felt so alone, but now I know I'm not alone." "You are definitely not alone," Minji said. "Keep working hard. Be proud of who you are." That night, Minji got an email from Professor Chen. Someone had recorded her speech and posted it online. It was going viral. People were sharing it on social media, commenting on how powerful it was. "Your voice is reaching people," Professor Chen wrote. "You are making a real difference. I am so proud of you." Minji read the email and smiled. A year ago, she had been silenced and humiliated. Now her voice was being heard around the country. She was not just telling her own story. She was giving voice to all the students who had felt dismissed and underestimated. This was just the beginning. Haijin was crying openly now, not even trying to hide it. Minji looked back at her classmates. "We are graduating today. We are moving on to college, to jobs, to the rest of our lives. We are going to do amazing things. Some of us will become doctors. Some will become teachers. Some will become artists or engineers or entrepreneurs. Some of us do not know yet what we will become, and that is okay too. But whatever we do, wherever we go, I hope we remember this. We are enough. Exactly as we are. Our accents, our backgrounds, our differences, they do not make us less. They make us who we are, and who we are is pretty amazing." The speech ended with a standing ovation. Students threw their caps in the air. Families cheered. It was a perfect moment, the culmination of years of hard work and struggle. After the ceremony, people crowded around Minji. Classmates hugged her. Teachers congratulated her. Parents thanked her for being an inspiration to their children. But the person Minji wanted to see most was her mother. She found Hyejin in the crowd and they embraced. "You did it," Hyejin said in Korean. "You did it." "We did it," Minji corrected her. That summer was busy. Minji spoke at several education conferences. She did interviews for education magazines and podcasts. She worked on another research paper, and she prepared to start at Harvard in the fall. She also spent time with Jiwon and other friends. They went to movies and hung out at coffee shops and enjoyed their last summer together before everyone went off to different colleges. "I am going to miss you," Jiwon said one evening as they sat on a bench watching the sunset. "Harvard is so far away." "I am going to miss you too," Minji said. "But we will stay in touch. And you are going to do amazing things at Berkeley. I know it." "Thanks to you," Jiwon said. "Watching you stand up for yourself inspired me to apply to better schools. I was going to just go to community college, but you made me believe I could do more." "You always could do more," Minji said. "I am glad you are seeing that now." In August, it was time to go to Harvard. Not for a summer program this time, but as a real student. A freshman. The beginning of 4 years that would shape her future. Hye-jin helped Minji pack. This time, she had more than one suitcase. She had clothes and books and supplies, everything she would need for her new life. The night before Minji left, they had a special dinner, just the two of them, like always. Hye-jin made all of Minji's favorite Korean dishes. They ate slowly, savoring the meal and the time together. "Are you scared?" Hye-jin asked. "A little," Minji admitted. "But mostly I'm excited. This is what I have been working toward my whole life." "You are going to do wonderful things," Hye-jin said. "You are going to change the world." "I am just going to be me," Minji said. "Work hard, do my research, help people when I can. That is enough." "That is more than enough," Hye-jin agreed. The next morning, they took a taxi to the airport. Hye-jin had taken the day off work to see Minji off. At the gate, they hugged for a long time. "I love you, Mom," Minji said. "Thank you for everything." "I love you too," Hye-jin said. "Now go learn, go grow, go be brilliant." Minji boarded the plane with tears in her eyes but also with hope in her heart. She was leaving behind the small apartment and the struggles and the pain of the past year. But she was also taking with her the lessons she had learned, the strength she had found, the voice she had discovered. When the plane landed in Boston, Sarah was waiting to greet her. They had arranged to be roommates again, this time in a freshman dorm. "Welcome back," Sarah said, hugging Minji. "Ready to start this journey?" "So ready," Minji said. Over the next few weeks, Minji settled into life as a Harvard student. She took classes in linguistics, psychology, statistics, and writing. She joined the linguistics research lab. She met with Professor Chen to discuss research projects. She made new friends and explored the campus. It was hard work, but it was also exactly what she wanted to be doing. Every day she learned something new. Every day she grew a little bit more. One afternoon in October, Minji was studying in the library when her phone buzzed. It was an email from an education policy organization. They had read her published paper on accent discrimination. They wanted to know if she would be interested in consulting on a new initiative to address bias in schools. Minji read the email twice. A policy organization wanted her input. They valued her expertise. They recognized her as an authority on this topic. She was 18 years old, a freshman in college, and she was being consulted by people who created education policy. She replied to the email saying yes, she was interested. Then she sat back and smiled. A year ago, she had been a girl that a teacher mocked for her accent. Today, she was helping to create policies that would protect students from that same kind of discrimination. She thought about Mrs. Whitmore. She wondered if her former teacher was following her career, if she saw the impact Minji was having, if she regretted her actions, but it did not matter anymore. Mrs. Whitmore's opinion was irrelevant. Minji had proven herself to the people who mattered, to academics and researchers, to students and educators who wanted to create change, and most importantly, to herself. Minji opened her laptop and started working on her response to the policy organization. She had ideas about how to address accent discrimination in schools. She had research to back up those ideas. She had a voice that people wanted to hear, and she was just getting started. 5 years later, Minji Park stood on a stage at a major education conference. She was now 23 years old, about to graduate from Harvard with a PhD in linguistics. She had published over 30 academic papers. Her research on linguistic discrimination had influenced policy changes in schools across the country. She had become exactly what Professor Chen had predicted, a leading voice in her field. She was giving a keynote speech to an audience of educators from around the world. The title of her talk was From Mockery to Mastery: How Educational Bias Shapes Linguistic Identity. As she spoke, she thought about the journey that had brought her here, the pain and the triumph, the struggles and the victories, the girl she had been and the woman she had become. Every student deserves to be valued, she said to the audience. Every student deserves to be seen for who they really are, not judged by their accent, not limited by their background, not dismissed because they are different. She looked out at the hundreds of educators in the audience. You have the power to change lives, to open doors, to help students discover their potential. Please use that power wisely. Please see every student as the unique, valuable person they are. The speech ended with a standing ovation, just like her high school graduation speech had. But this time, the audience was full of education leaders and policymakers, people who had the power to create real, lasting change. After the conference, Minji checked her phone. There was a text from Hyejin, who was now retired and living comfortably thanks to Minji's success. Watched your speech online. So proud. Love you. There was also a message from Professor Chen. Brilliant as always. Ready to discuss your postdoc plans? And there was an email from a high school student named Maria. Dear Professor Park, it read, I read your paper about accent discrimination. I'm going through something similar at my school. Your work gave me courage to speak up. Thank you for being a voice for students like me. Minji read Maria's email 3 times. This was why she did what she did. Not for the awards or the recognition, but for students like Maria. For every kid who felt dismissed or underestimated. For everyone who had been told they were not good enough. She replied to Maria immediately, offering support and advice. Then she closed her laptop and looked out the window of her hotel room. Somewhere out there, a student was being mocked for their accent. Somewhere, a talented kid was being told they were not smart enough. Somewhere, potential was being wasted because of bias and prejudice. But also somewhere out there, students were speaking up. Teachers were examining their biases. Schools were creating more equitable policies. Change was happening, slowly but surely. And Minji Park, the girl who had once cried in her tiny bedroom after being humiliated, was leading that change. Her accent, once a source of shame, was now a source of pride. It was a reminder of her bilingual brilliance. It was proof of her journey. It was part of her identity as a researcher who understood discrimination from the inside. Minji smiled and opened her laptop again. She had work to do, papers to write, students to mentor, policies to influence, a field to change. She was exactly where she belonged, and she was just getting started. The girl that a racist teacher had mocked for her accent had become a genius that Harvard and the world recognized. But more than that, she had become a voice for voiceless students everywhere. She had turned her pain into purpose. She had transformed humiliation into a mission, and that was the greatest achievement of all.